Hi, I'm Jimmy Fasig with Fasig Brooks Law Offices, and I'm here with my law partner Dana Brooks.
Hey there.
And we want to talk today about driving under the influence of marijuana. There is a lot of media going on about
We just did
marijuana,
something about
and
it. Yeah.
we posted something online recently about being impaired in the workplace, and I think we kind of agree it's not a good idea to smoke weed before you go to work.
This is what we were talking about
Right.
just now. You know, my position on it is you don't need to be impaired at work, whether
Right.
it's from not getting enough sleep, you know, being hungover,
Exactly.
drunk, smoking weed, taking prescription pills,
Right.
maybe even depression. You know, whatever is causing you to be impaired and not, you know, firing all cylinders at work. As an employer, I want to know about it and I want to help you. That's number one. I'm not really interested in punishment so much as I am helping people. But the other issue is those are wildly different substances. I know they're both, you know,
Alcohol and marijuana.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
yes.
prescription pills.
Yeah.
Some of that is
Yeah.
somewhat knowable. You know how much a person weighs. You know, you ought to know how to prescribe a medication for them and how to tell them to take it. If a person knows what they weigh, whether they've eaten, what their tolerance is, they ought to be able to know how to drink responsibly and how much alcohol they can metabolize, whether they should be drinking, you know, wine or they should be, you know, taking shots of liquor. I mean, those are two different things, but they're somewhat standardized. But now, you know, when we're talking about medical marijuana, that affects people seemingly wildly differently.
Yes.
So it's almost like you've got to be a mature enough, responsible person to recognize when you are impaired and not drive, not make major decisions, not, you know, be caring for people who are dependent on you and not coming to work.
Well, the interesting thing from a legal aspect of it is, if you're talking about, for example, I'm as a personal injury attorney, sometimes I have to prosecute defendants who have been drinking and driving or have been smoking weed and driving. They're impaired driving. But from an evidentiary perspective, it's a lot easier to prove the alcohol is affecting their driving because we've got that standardized. It's 0.08 in Florida is
And as
the
long as
legal
that machine's
standard.
working, is calibrated right, you know, that ought to be knowable.
Then you know that that person is impaired if they have blown over the legal limit or if they are over the legal limit.
Or they're demonstrably
if their
impaired.
blood shows that they're over the legal limit. So that's kind of easy. Now, when you're talking about marijuana, though, it's all over the board, and what happens is you can't blow. There's no blow test for marijuana.
There's no blood test that'll do anything other than say it's in the system. It's not going to say it's in the system at that snapshot in time to where I know that person for at least 15 minutes shouldn't have been behind the wheel. That's not out there.
Yeah.
And you know, again,
it's a much bigger challenge.
Male, female, they metabolize it different. What forms? Some people, you've got ingestibles, you've got topicals, you've got things you vape, now you've got flour, you've got all kinds of different sources.
Yeah, and they have,
everybody does it differently.
Yeah, and so the challenge is, how do you prove impairment? Now, what the people do, what the police officers do at the scene a lot of times is, if they suspect somebody's impaired, they will do a field sobriety test. And so that's one thing that you have as a lawyer trying to prove the case. You have the video of the field sobriety test that can help. What we also often run into is, if there is an accident and it's a major accident and the defendant, the person that caused the accident, ends up going to the hospital, and then they run their blood test, then you can find out how much marijuana is in their bloodstream.
Can you find out how much, or just that there is some?
No, there's a levels that come on the hospital records.
I've never talked to an expert that could say based on a level they could tell right then, because you know so much about marijuana, it'll leave you so fast depending on what route. You know, you could inhale it and in 15 minutes be fine.
What I've run into in the past is I've got to hire an expert.
You have to have experts.
I got to get an expert to take a look at it and to testify whether or not this level of THC in the blood means that our person was impaired at the time of the accident. Because you also have to take into consideration the time of the accident versus the time that the blood was taken.
Yes, and you also remember, again, just because you were in an accident and you were under the influence doesn't mean you were negligent. Somebody else could have been negligent, but you're the one who's got something in your system. So we always have to look at the facts of the case. What happened? Did you blow through a light? Did you pull out in front of somebody? Did you never hit the brakes and run right into somebody? at most of these cases, at the end of the day, from our perspective, come down to the behavior, the facts of the case, the physical evidence, and the evidence of the person's behavior at the time. So just remember, this is a murky area, whether it's employment, like we talked about on our social media, or if it's talking about tort.
There's one more thing I wanted to mention, Dana, and that is, this is important for anybody that gets involved in an accident and they want to sue somebody else. If, like my client, for example, if they've been smoking marijuana, that could potentially kill the case, because the rule in Florida is if you are partially at fault for the accident, if you're 50% at fault or more for an accident, and it turns out you are impaired, then the entire case, it's a complete bar on recovery.
Yeah,
and so that's also another element that we always have to take into consideration, because...
And again, I think that's going to look to the facts to see, first of all, are you more than 50% responsible? Who decides that? That's a fact question for a jury. And, were you impaired? If it's alcohol, much easier. If it's marijuana, it could be tricky. It's going to be a battle of the experts, like most of these legal cases turn out to be once they are litigated and they're looking like they're going to trial. So call a lawyer. We're here and we'll walk you through it.
Thank you so much.